suggest we take 2 minutes. And then we'll get started. Here's the good news. I have, I think, 4 presentations to give, but I was able to do it in half an hour the first time around. And I suspect I'll be able to do it in half an hour here, too. So let's take 2 minutes. We'll come back. We'll go through this, and then we'll get out of here. So, aside from being quick, I also promise you that I won't put you on the spot.
That's already done.
So I'm already a leg up on Jason.
Ouch.
So I'll give you a very quick background on me and the work that sort of our office does. Excuse me. So as of about 2 weeks ago, I'm the acting director of governance and advisory services for the province for municipal affairs. My primary role is to support the municipal advisors. So the way the province is split up into regions, and we have an advisor assigned to each of those areas that essentially provide advice, assistance to municipalities, primarily in navigating the web that is the provincial government. What you're going to see here today is a briefer version of a presentation that we've a number of presentations that we've given to, I'd say, 35 councils across the province. The first time we delivered on these materials was a new council orientation session after the last municipal election. So if you're elected, you'll probably see this more times than you'd like to after you're elected. So as a new council, you'll be invited to a session, likely somewhere central in the province, where we will deliver a number of things about roles and responsibilities, decision-making, conflict of interest, which we'll cover at a high level here. So to Shalina's earlier point, there'll be lots of opportunities to train, okay? And some of the existing councils, like I said, have seen this over and over and over again to the point where they could probably give the presentations better than I could. So my primary role is to support our advisory group. Typically, I'm there to sort of field questions from the advisors that come from municipalities, but that's the primary part of the role. This presentation goes a lot better if there's a discussion. If you're not interested in that, that's okay too. We can power through it. So there's no pressure in that regard. But I would invite Rhonda, Shalina, Councillor Ivey, Jason, Mark, to jump in at any time. If there's something I've missed, something I've sort of glossed over that I think is important, there's no interrupting. Just go for it. It's fine. Same with you folks. If you have any questions, or if I've glossed over something that you were interested in, we'll stop. It's fine. Most of these presentations are what we think you should know before you get into this. If there are things that you wanted to know that aren't covered, again, just ask. We have enough expertise in the room that we can probably cobble something together in terms of an answer. So the first 2 that I'm going to deliver, and I think they're all part of the same presentation, are how municipal councils make decisions, essentially, and then a little bit about conflicts of interest, because that comes up over and over and over again. So a little overview of municipal government in Nova Scotia. There are 50 municipal units in Nova Scotia, soon to be 49, for obvious reasons. They're divided into regional municipalities, rural municipalities, and towns. So your regionals right now are Cape Breton, Regional Municipality, Halifax, and Queens, and then of course the new Regional Municipality, Windsor, Hants, as of April 1st. And I think someone alluded to this earlier, but I think the very first decision of the new council will be a name. It's in the legislation. So on day 1, you'll be put to the task of a very important decision that everyone will be waiting and watching you for.
Maybe. I don't know.
Sorry?
There's a grand piece that goes behind it. So it is one of the most critical things that they have to do, but I'm not so sure that it'll be on the agenda on the first day. Hey, what do you think? It's a process. Okay. It is responsibility of the new council, yes.
Outside of our regions, we have, relatively along county lines, we have rural municipalities. So that the county, or the municipality of the county of, or sometimes you'll see the municipality of the district of. And all that means is a county, you folks who know, is split up into 2 parts. Okay, so you have the municipality of the district of West Hants and the municipality of the district of East Hants. That's all it means. Towns, of course, villages. Some of the differences, and this is a source of controversy and almost every discussion that occur between towns and rurals. Towns own their own roads. It's a huge cost. Rurals own very few of their roads. Regionals and rurals. Regionals do not have any municipal units within their boundaries. So the Halifax Region Municipality is Halifax. There are no villages, there are no towns. Same with CBRN, and the same will be the case for Windsor West Hants. We won't get into it, but each of those, there are different sort of authorities, restrictions, responsibilities, depending on what type of municipality you are. We won't get into those, but it's good to be aware. So, super exciting, constitutional law. Essentially, the way Canada has its own constitution in our federal system. Responsibilities in our constitution are divided between the federal and provincial governments. So the federal government is responsible for defense. They're responsible for monetary policy. There are a number of other things if you look at the constitution. Provinces, same thing. They're responsible for hospitals, local taxation, etc. The only reference in our constitution to municipalities is the fact that the constitution authorizes the province to create municipalities. That's the only reference in the constitution. So what that means is the federal government has a basket of powers, the provincial governments have a basket of powers, and then from that provincial basket, they assign responsibilities to the municipalities through legislation. So municipalities, from a legal perspective, are creatures of statute. They're created by legislation. So in Nova Scotia, we have, for everybody but Halifax, we have the Municipal Government Act, which lays out the primary authorities and responsibilities. There are over 60 pieces of legislation that impact municipalities, but the primary ones are the Municipal Government Act, and for Halifax, the HRM Charter. So, in Nova Scotia, what that means is, if a municipality wants to do anything, they need to find the authority in legislation. If it's not there, chances are you can't do it. There are some nuances there that I'm not quite hitting on, but for the most part, the presumption is you can't act unless the legislation says you can. So this includes decisions like spending money, passing bylaws, borrowing, providing service. So how do councils make decisions? They make them one of three ways: resolutions, policies, or bylaws. In the legislation, there's a bit of a hierarchy, with bylaws being on top. So when you want to make any kind of decision at council, you have to find the authority, and then the authority will tell you, do I have to do it by bylaw, policy, or resolution? And I think for the most part, most decisions are made via resolution. So this is a slide I inserted a few years ago because I was thinking, if I was a new councillor, what are some of the basics that I would want to know about making decisions at council? So a quorum is a majority of the maximum number of persons that may be elected to council. So you're looking at a council of 11 to start. 12? So you would need 7 in order to make any kind of decision at a council meeting. There are some exceptions to that rule, which we'll hit on a little bit when we talk about conflict of interest.
I'll qualify that. You have to have 7 there to even hold the meeting. Not just make decision meeting, but even hold the meeting.
So, in terms of voting, any question is decided by majority vote, unless otherwise prescribed. There are some unique circumstances where you require a 2/3 vote, but very, very rare that happens. Now, this is a little bit interesting. You can't abstain under the Municipal Government Act. So you can't say, this is a decision I want no part of. If you abstain, you are considered a no vote. Okay? Unless you have a policy to the contrary. So, for example, the town of Amherst, they have a policy that says if you don't vote, you're a yes. Because what was happening was their mayor was chairing meetings, forgetting to vote, and then would be recorded as a no vote. So every other member of council was saying yes, the mayor was recorded as saying no. They changed the burden so that that wasn't happening. And any vote that's tied is a failed vote. So now we'll talk a little bit about conflict of interest. So I want to draw a distinction. What we're going to talk about is the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, which applies only to financial matters. Okay? There may be conflicts of interest outside of that are covered by codes of conduct, that sort of thing. We're not going to touch on those. I'm only going to talk about what the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act says. So in this case, the Act defines a conflict of interest as any decision that comes before council that could provide or has a financial impact on you, a close family member, an organization with which you're associated, those sorts of things. Financial impact can be positive in terms of a gain, negative in terms of a loss. So the Act talks about the who, what, when, where of these kinds of interests. And it goes beyond just municipal councils. It actually applies to a number of your committees. So it essentially applies to any entity that's making any kind of a decision where they derive some authority from legislation. So it actually applies well beyond just municipal council. So there are a number of committees of councils that would have public members on it where this would likely apply. I'm thinking your audit committee would be one.
Planning advisory.
Sorry?
Planning advisory.
Planning advisory, and there'd be many, many, many others. So here's some questions you should be asking if you're not sure if you're in a conflict of interest. So could a matter before council have a financial impact on me? The answer is yes, you're in a conflict. We'll talk about what you do after that. Could it have an impact on an organization that I'm a part of? You're in a conflict. Could a matter before council have a financial impact on an immediate family member, my spouse, or someone living with me? The answer is yes, you're in a conflict. Could a matter before council have a financial impact on an entity or venture where I might obtain an interest in the future? That would also put you in conflict. So for example, what I always use as an example is there's a waste management contract up for review by council, and you know that 2 weeks from now you are going to be a major partner or shareholder in that organization. Step away. Conflict of interest is a bit of a dirty word, but it's not a problem. As engaged community members, you're going to have circumstances where you're involved with something in the community that comes before council that puts you in a conflict. It's okay. That's all right. What's not okay is if you just bowl ahead and participate in the decision. So what the Act also sets up, we're going to get to that, is what you do when you're in a conflict so that you avoid any problems under the legislation. So there are some exceptions to the basic rules that we've just talked about. It doesn't apply to any interest in a matter that you may have that is shared by everyone else in the community. So for example, if you're discussing tax rates, you want to lower tax rates or you want to increase tax rates, that is likely going to have an impact on you as a taxpayer of the municipality. However, it's going to have the same impact on every other citizen of your municipality. If you were then in a conflict, you could never have a discussion about taxes. So you're accepted, right? So if you're talking about a decision like taxes, you're not conflicted. That's specifically exempted in the Act. There are other exceptions. I'm not going to get into these in great detail. If you're talking about a service, for example, again, that every other member of your community enjoys, that wouldn't put you in a conflict. So what do you do? The first thing you do is say, I'm conflicted. You tell everybody at the table, I'm conflicted. It's good to give a little bit of general background of what the issue is. And at that point, you withdraw from the decision-making process. If it's a public meeting, leave the table. If it's a closed meeting of council or in camera, leave the room. We recommend you leave the room in either circumstance. Don't be seen to be influencing in either way, whether it's a wink or a smile or an angry look, whatever it is, just avoid it. You have to have faith that your fellow councilors will make the right decision. Okay? If you participate in the decision, you're putting yourself personally at risk. Because if there is a complaint, if this does end up being reviewed by a judge, you're going to be responsible for your own costs, aside from insurance issues. And I don't know enough about that to comment. I believe you're insured as councillors, but I don't know how far that insurance extends in terms of these particular issues. But there have been examples in Nova Scotia in the recent past where folks have had to pay for their own defense. So the little slogan we've come up with in this one is, if in doubt, sit it out. If you're not sure, you think you may be conflicted, just step away. This legislation is here to protect you. Okay. So that is, we're down 2 of 4. Any questions in particular with those 2, or anything that I've missed, or anything you were hoping you were going to get that you haven't gotten? All right.
Just to emphasize, it's self-appointed. Right? So, the CAO's office or the clerk's office, or even sometimes the solicitor, should say things like, you might want to consider this, you might want to look at this, versus you are in conflict. If you are elected and you're asking me, I will not tell you that you are alive. I will ask you to look at these things so that you can solve it. As Nick has said, you're on your own, you're challenged. So you have to be really confident.
And that being said, there's a lot of times where I've seen this at other council meetings where another council is like, you're in conflict, or putting them out. It's better for you to do it before somebody else pointed it in this public meeting.
And
It's
to,
not for them to say.
No,
That's
yeah, they
exactly.
shouldn't say that at all. Yeah.
it's also, I always describe it as, it's a shield, not a sword. So it shouldn't be used by another councillor to remove your voice from a decision where they think you're on the opposite side. That's not how it's supposed to be used. It should be used as a shield to protect you from being put in a position where you're conflicted, right? So it's not meant to remove you from difficult decisions. It's meant to protect you where, again, you're in a position where you're conflicted based on your interests. Go through roles and responsibilities at a municipality, in particular between council and staff. So this is sort of motherhood and apple pie. The role of municipalities is provide good government, provide municipal services, and develop and maintain safe and viable communities. So I'm going to ask you one question. You don't have to answer. Do you have a sense for what services municipalities must provide? Any guesses? There is one. There is one. Policing. And it's under the Police Act. Beyond that, you don't have to provide anything. You don't have to provide water, you don't have to provide sewer. I'm trying to think whether you don't have to provide garbage collection, recreation. You don't have to do any of that. Now, if you probably withdraw from all those things, you're never going to get reelected. So there are expectations, but from a legislative perspective, policing is the only one. The only one.
And the opposite things that we don't do. But we can't get involved.
Yeah. So what's the role of council? To govern, pretty obvious. Make policy decisions, approve budgets, tax rates, support organizations and activities, promote the municipality, and probably most importantly, provide direction to the CAO. Okay? So you are sort of the policy strategy leaders of the municipality, and once you've come up with that vision of what you want to do, it becomes Mark's job to fulfill that vision through the use of staff and resources. The role of the mayor. The mayor doesn't really have any additional duties. They have the same rights in terms of voting as every other councillor. The Act says the mayor may monitor the administration of government, communicate and make recommendations to council. You'll probably find that they have a special relationship with the CAO because they tend to be the spokesperson, but that's not legislated. Okay? Their primary role is to chair meetings. But other than that, they have the same rights, responsibilities, authority as every other member of council. So your role as councillor, you're the connection between constituents and council. I think from what I've heard, you folks are well aware of that. The one thing I would caution you about, once you're at the council table, your role is bigger than just your district. You must guard the interests of the municipality as a whole. Okay? Obviously, there are interests in your district that you're going to bring forward to the council table, and vice versa. But once you're there, you have to think regionally. Okay? There's likely going to be times where you may have to make decisions that, how do I put this? There may be opportunities for your district where, based on the information and evidence presented, it makes sense to go in another district. It may happen that way. That's the job, to make those tough decisions. So you're in a CAO system. There's the other side of it is a clerk system. In a clerk system, you become the managers. So in a clerk system, council's role is much more involved on the administrative side. You have to make those decisions. You're in the CAO system, so it's a little bit different. The CAO does all of that administrative work. The CAO is the only employee of council. And one of my colleagues says, as one of my colleagues puts it, you have one neck to wring. So if you're not happy about things in municipality, that's the neck you're going to be bringing. Okay? If there are issues with staff, that's the responsibility of the CAO. It's not your role. Okay? Now you may bring issues up that the CAO then runs with or has to do further work on, but it's not your job to admonish staff or direct staff. That's Mark's role. Okay? The CAO also has the right to attend all meetings of council. All meetings of council. That includes discussions about the CAO's performance. So you're welcome to suggest to Mark, if it's performance review time, that it would be, you'd prefer if he left the room, and he may choose to do that. Okay? Knowing Mark, he probably will, but he doesn't have to. Okay? The CAO can attend every meeting of council, whether it's in camera or in public. So as I've touched on, all municipal staff work for Mark, okay? They take direction only from Mark. Where the CAO provides advice to council and it differs from that of staff, staff have the right to bring that information forward to council. Okay? Same with the solicitor. If the solicitor provides information to council, they have the right to present that information for obvious reasons. They're the only ones in a position to be able to answer questions in terms of legal issues. Okay. Now, we have a presentation that you may see later, assuming you're elected, but there's a very fine line in terms of what you can and can't ask staff to do. The basic dividing line is you can ask staff for information. So if you're looking to find out what recreation programs the municipality offers, you can go to the director of recreation, say, can you send me one of the brochures? But you can't ask them this, you can't go back to them and say, I want you to do a jurisdictional scan on what other municipalities of our size are doing in terms of recreation. You can't do that, okay? The only person that can direct staff in terms of their work is Mark. But you're more than welcome to ask staff for information. The problem is sometimes information becomes work if it's not a matter of just pulling it off, the F drive on your computer, okay? Your best bet for any of this is to go through Mark. That's the safest way to do it, and then Mark will get it for you from staff. We've talked about this quite a bit, but again, this is sort of an infographic that shows the relationship between the CAO, council, and staff. Council sets the strategic direction, the CAO runs with it, and uses the administrative resources to fulfill that strategic vision. And then, of course, your directors and staff are there to develop policy, to do the research required, and to do the day-to-day jobs that are required of a municipality. Now, there will be times at council where you need staff to present information, to present options. You will give that direction to Mark, and Mark will go back and see that a staff report is completed. You guys probably have a standard form for your staff reports, okay? So if there is a need to do that research, you'll present that at the council table, and assuming council wants to move forward, you'll request that staff provide information and options about what you might do on a particular issue. So, we're heading home stretch here. I'm going to do this very quickly because I do not purport to be an expert in economic development. Jason, you can jump in too here if you want.
Oh, I'm not an expert.
So the key here is, and the key to all of this is, and I'll even back up to the constitutional piece. If you're here because you want a new hospital in your municipality, this is probably not the right level of government to be running for, okay? So if there are key issues that you're running on and you see this presentation and go, oh, sugar, I have to run for Parliament or I have to run for the legislature, that's fine, but this isn't the right role for you, okay? So when you're thinking about the issues that are important to you and the reason that you're getting into this, you have to determine sort of what the appropriate level of government is. There's no point, again, on my hospital example, of going, I want a hospital in the community and running for council, because that's not really within your sphere of control. You can certainly advocate in your role as councillor, but again, you can't come in and go, we're going to build a hospital. It doesn't work that way. So economic development, another place where we have to look at the baskets and what everyone controls. The federal government controls essentially interest rates, monetary policy, that sort of thing. Provincial government controls your labor market, programs and services for business, deficit spending. What you control in terms of the levers you have for economic development are land use planning, which is important, property tax policy, particularly commercial, the permitting licensing process for particular types of businesses, and infrastructure investment, which may attract business or may turn business away. I'm only going to hit on these very quickly. So what we did back in 2013, 2014, am I right on that? Okay. So we started the Regional Enterprise Network Program, and what those entities do is they essentially become more or less the economic development wing for municipalities, but they're doing it regionally. So they don't just cover the new regional municipality of West Hants, they'll cover who's in the valley, so Kings, Kentville,
Middleton to here. And that was county is not,
Yeah.
could be, but are not. So for the most part, everybody in between might as well hold on. But geography, that was county to here.
but when they're doing their thing, they're looking at the region and where it makes sense to do things from a regional perspective. So they're not solely concerned with your interests. If there's a new business coming in and they think it makes more sense to go in Kings County, that's probably what they'll recommend. Again, their core activities: develop and implement a regional economic strategy, business attraction, retention, and expansion, inform partners about business climate conditions and opportunities. They're doing a lot of, we just got back from a 2-day REN conference, they're doing a lot of really great work. So I'd suggest if you're interested in what they're doing, they each have websites, check it out. You guys have, in particular, a very strong REN, so you're very lucky. Again, I'm not going to get into great detail, partially because I'm not an expert on this stuff, but there are a number of players in this realm, the RENs being the major one for you folks, but there's a number of other folks that help business startups, provide funding, that touch on all of the things municipalities do, and in particular work of the RENs. So what is the specific municipal role? So know what you've got in terms of your community profile, your community assets, your infrastructure, know what you're good at, what you can do, what you can't do, and have a plan for those that might come to you looking to know, well, how do I start up X business? If there's a licensing process, if there are planning issues, it's a good idea to know to be ready for opportunities. I'm not going to get into these. These are all, again, sort of things that you would instinctively know they're common sense. You want to be welcoming, you want to say yes whenever possible, and it won't always be possible. But to the extent that you can, you want to be able to say yes to new opportunities. And this you'll hear over and over again, and you folks have already taken a huge step in that regard, but think regionally. We're at a point in time in history where you can't do things alone. It's hard to do, it's not economically feasible, so work with your partners. And again, you guys have taken a huge step just in coming together as a consolidated unit, which puts you in good standing to take advantage of future opportunities. But there are partners even beyond those borders that will be able to help you in this regard too.
And some of those partners are municipal, neighboring municipalities as well.
Exactly. So again, we've already kind of hit on this, so I'm not going to go into it at any great length. These materials will all be available online. I'm not going to purport to read off the screen. So that is it. I think I did it in half an hour. Pretty close. So is there anything in any of those broad topics that you were curious about? Because otherwise that's it for today. But if there's anything that we've missed, anything beyond any of the presentations that you're curious about in terms of campaigns or forms or your role as a counselor or anything that you didn't hear that will be important in terms of your decision about whether you're going to run, please fire away. And I think this will come up if it hasn't already. It's not like we're done with you after today. If you have questions, we're all available to answer those questions. So I know Ron and Shalina, I think their contact information is in the candidates package. And if there are issues that they can't answer, they know how to get a hold of Jason and I know Mark's always reachable and he's a good communicator. So if you have any questions, this is not your only opportunity. With that said, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
And there's more information, especially in your campaign and talking to electors about what residents need to know in the campaign candidates package and on our Stronger Region website. And, so make sure you have that external reach without seeing reading into your head also while you're talking can or to residents, because it's good for them to go check it as well.
Sure, and Councillor Ivey, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. The materials, if anyone wants to rewatch them again, what's the plan moving forward in terms of?
Being able to listen to it?
Yeah.
Is that the? So we've recorded, I guess about 3 hours, 2.5 hours of tape here. So there's, if you can imagine, to go through and cut this, and this is my second take at it, it's going to take a few hours, but I told Rhonda that I try to have it so that she'd have it available starting this Monday.
Oh, wow.
That's not just a flip of a switch, because we're going to cut in the slides, and you don't need the explanation, but the light here on you folks is different than it is on the screen, so we want it to make sense for you. So it's just to do that, but that's the commitment, and that's what we're going to work to achieve.
So if I have it on Monday, it still may take a day or two before it's on the website, because that's another step we have to go to that takes a few other people to deal with.
Are the PowerPoint presentations in the campaign package as well?
No.
But they're on a stronger region or will be?
No, they're just going to be part of this
Okay.
here.
So if there were some things that were glossed over and you want to look at it more carefully in terms of bullet points, those will be available as well.
We can post it on the website. We can post it on the website, I would think.
Yeah, and just the other thing that I'll add, that there's two ways that this may end up getting done. One is as a full start to finish with, we'll cut the breaks out and, you know, just that sort of thing. But then it may, depending on timing, get broken up where it's a bite. So the first 20 minutes where it was the intro and so on, right? So you might be able to pick up parts, but I don't want to set an expectation. It just depends on timing. So, right.
So if there's no shoot.
So I'm just wondering, I often see a member of municipal affairs at council meetings, sometimes, not often. And I'm just wondering how the interaction between council and your department operates. Do they ask you to come for a specific reason? Are you there because you want them to do something? What is the interaction?
So that's a good question, and
All of the above.
yes, exactly. So there are times where we attend because there are issues of, I'll say, of a provincial interest, and we want to be aware, and we want our minister to be aware. So Jason or one of the advisors will go to the council meeting, they'll take notes, and they'll report back because there are issues of provincial interest. There may be times where you want us to be there for a particular reason, and we go. We tend, Jason may correct me here, we tend not to be participants at a council meeting because it's not our role. We're usually observers, and if there are questions after the fact that folks have, we'll weigh in. But we tend not to actively participate at council meetings. Those are your sessions, not ours.
So I could probably go a step further.
You go ahead.
We don't have a vote.
Right.
So we're not at the table. If we're asked to give a presentation,
Sure.
Question and answer, that sort of thing. We're not voting members, so we'll watch.
Our position,
We'll
sorry.
have conversations, but that's about it.
And often there's a lot of communication before, they don't just randomly appear one evening and decide
That's
to
not
sit
true.
in. Well,
I'm sure I've done that.
there's usually communication, especially with staff, to department staff as well, and there's communication leading up to that, and then that's when they might make a decision to come and listen and observe and so forth, and especially check on staff's feedback for maybe council questions and so forth, especially if there's been direction being communicated back.
But we're there for you. So
Yeah,
we're there.
absolutely.
We work very closely with the administrative folks in particular. So, and I'll say this, for the consolidation, we have worked particularly closely with you folks, both Windsor and West Hants. To be honest, more so than we would typically with any municipality. But we're interested, and we've been part of this from day one, and so we've been more engaged, I'd say, with your two councils for that reason. The flip side of that is, if there are particular issues that you want to discuss with us, we're always there.